What about vendors and related technologies? Jude, you mentioned NFV. I mean, who are the winners and losers in this process? There's the legacy players. There's startups. Who's going to win as SDN gets adopted? Jude, your sense of that?
I don't think it's possible to pick who can win at this point so early in the game, but for NFV, definitely VMware is a big player. And as far as the SDN, this kind of concept, although Cisco calls it by a different name, I would say that Cisco, because of their massive footprint within the enterprise already, is going to be a leader almost by default, just by already being there.
Right. People trust that name.
Exactly, and they already have all their stuff. So it's less intimidating, I think, as a transition.
All right, who do you see as the big winners and losers as companies move to the SDN?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of talk about the legacy hardware people are fretting over this, but maybe long term, but in the short term, you have to understand that most enterprises have all that legacy hardware in-house, and they still want to leverage that and derive value from that. So, and hardly anybody has the expertise in-house to, simply set this up on a commodity basis and lay the software on top and make it go. Facebook can do it and Google can do it, but
right.
Even Ford Motor Company probably couldn't do it. Smaller and medium-sized organizations probably don't have that knowledge. So the opportunity for the legacy vendors and their channel supporters is to sort of guide the enterprise through this process. Whether or not that ultimately turns to their benefit, to the vendor's benefit, is still up in the air. It would be almost it would be their game to lose if they ended up blowing it. But I don't think it's accurate to really talk about who's winning and who's losing. I think everybody here can make a go of this in one way or the other. You might not have Cisco anymore as top dog. They could be a lot more fracturization of the market after all is said and done. But it's all speculative at this point.
Interesting. You mentioned Facebook, and from the survey I talked about who the adopters are, and the biggest chunk, the 19% of adopters, are tech companies, followed by 12% of telecom and internet companies. So it's no surprise companies already involved with networking are deep into SDN. Jeff, your take on who's going to emerge as a leader in this world? Who's going to win in the SDN world?
Well, I tend to agree right now. So it's a little early. Again, we got a situation where you have the bulk of enterprises are probably still doing testing and all that. I think Jude made a good point. Companies like Cisco, they've got a huge install base, and going over to an SDN network is not a rip and replace sort of thing. It's a migration sort of thing. So I think, and certainly you see that in the Quinn Street survey where Cisco's got, I think, 45% of the people surveyed, so that they're running Cisco SDN right now. So yeah, I don't think you can pick winners or losers. I think what you've got now is you've still got a situation where the market is still developing, and so what you're going to see is people like Cisco who they're able to sell into their customer base already. You've got other companies, smaller companies, say Big Switch and Plexi, who are making, who are raising a lot of money still. So there's still a lot of play that needs to be done out there before you can start saying who's going to win and lose.
You talk about funding of startups, among other things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you had three startups just in January that got over, they got tens of millions in venture capital funds. So there's a lot of backing of them. You've got Cisco and everybody else is putting a lot of money into this, into their portfolios. So it still needs to shake out some.
Sean, your take? Who's going to emerge victorious? And
My take.
Somewhere in there, OpenStack could be a factor in all this?
No. OpenStack is not going to be a factor, unfortunately. It'll be a platform that people use, but That'll be interesting on the NFV side. From my perspective, I know we're talking that it's a little bit immature for some, but you have to remember that it was now 4 years ago. So that's a good amount of time that VMware bought Nicira for over $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
So 4 years ago, the VMware people and their accountants did the math to figure that it was worth at least $1 billion. I would say and argue strongly that Nicira asset is now worth significantly more than $1 billion. Their run rate is significantly more than that in any given year. So if we assume that NSX is SDN, then NSX is doing quite well. But that's pure play. The other thing that we have to consider is the first generation of SDN, which was very complicated for people to figure out, including me. It was all OpenFlow based, and OpenFlow was very much tied to the hardware, which is kind of stupid when you think about it. You're talking about something that's software-defined networking, but you need a physical switch to support it. So if the physical switch didn't support OpenFlow, you have no SDN. The modern approaches to SDN, the ones that I happen to like, the ones that VMware is using now and Cisco is using and a few others, are VXLAN based. Now VXLAN is an IEEE standard. It allows for encapsulation of a layer 2 network over layer 3. That's basically a wider domain over a shorter domain. You can do VXLAN overlay on existing hardware as an encapsulation. Now that's kind of a lot of funky words there, but basically means I could take lower level protocols, bunch them together, and run it over. So the magic is, if you have, let's say, NSX or some kind of VXLAN enabled SDN, it's a logical deployment on top of your existing infrastructure as an overlay. That's still complicated. You still need an orchestration system, maybe a controller, maybe policies and security and everything else, but it's a little bit different. Now these are newer concepts, but the idea of overlaying on top is a standard networking idea. I brought props today. This is my standard Cat 5.
Are you going to explain the overlay idea with SDN overlaid with over a hardware infrastructure?
When I first got this cable, I ran low-level protocols, Novell NetWare and crap like that. Wow. That's layer 1. You connect, and then you have Ethernet, and then you have TCP. You have TCP/IP rather. Ethernet. Then you have TCP/IP. Then you have other higher-level services. You can have VLAN, VXLAN, etc., etc. So in networking, you only have two things that you ever really have to think about, in my opinion: abstraction and encapsulation. So what we're doing with SDN now is on one layer, vendors are abstracting it. They're saying instead of a switch, a physical piece of hardware, we're abstracting it as a software construct. And on the wire, it's now encapsulation as what had been lower level protocols into something that's a bundle, so that way we can understand software in different ways.
Amazing. Jude, your take on winners and losers? Are the legacy players really upset about this, or they're going to stay ahead?
I think it's just too early to tell, but I don't think that the legacy players necessarily are feeling that much heat, because the fact that they are already in there is a big advantage.
Yeah, good deal.